It ain't for everybody.
Well, it appears that liberal media is flooding the zone with former Biden officials. Stephen L. Miller of The Spectator notes in a new piece that while former White House officials joining networks isn't new whatsoever, there does seem to be a particularly aggressive pipeline from this administration to cable news.
For example, former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki now hosts her own show on MSNBC, Inside with Jen Psaki. CNN hired former Biden White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield as an on-air commentator and contributor, and that same network also added Jamal Simmons, fresh off his role as Vice President Kamala Harris's Communications Director. Full disclosure, Simmons is a former Hill TV host as well.
Journalist Glenn Greenwald writes, as the 2024 election approaches, NBC News, MSNBC, and CNN go on a hiring spree of putting former Biden White House communications officials in their newsroom, turning themselves into even more blatant pro-Dem state TV outlets than they were before. It does have an effect. I think it's hard to argue that it doesn't have an effect on the coverage of these networks. When you see stories like the Hunter Biden malfeasance story, where mainstream media, cable news and the Washington Post, the New York Times, and others, take for granted that the White House's narrative that this is all made up, that's taken on face value because they're very sympathetic to these people, in part because they're staffed by people who used to work there. And so they have all these insider connections. And they go, well, Jen, does that sound right to you? Kate, does that sound right to you? And they, they don't totally get out of government communicator mode when they join these networks. Kate Bedingfield, who was mentioned as one of those figures, that name always sticks out to me because she was very involved in the pressure on social media companies to censor COVID-related speech. It was she who provided the incentive when asked about the role at the time that Facebook was platforming misinformation and causing people to have vaccine hesitance. That was the White House's narrative. And she went on TV and said, if they don't do more to take down speech we don't like, we must look at changing their liability protection under Section 230 to punish them. That was coming from her mouth. She was the one who, in one sense, you can probably say got the White House in trouble. Now they're facing lawsuits for potentially, threatening companies, muzzling companies, violating the First Amendment. It was her declarations there.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that Woody Allen aphorism. I don't want to be. Oh, he was quoting, I guess, a Marx Brother or something. But I don't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. I mean, I can imagine a world where there are, in fact, members of these campaigns that are willing to be adversarial to the administration that they used to work for or to the Democratic Party in general, hypothetically, but people who are willing to do that aren't granted entry into those kind of positions. I obviously worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign. It will not surprise anyone that the mainstream media wasn't rolling out a red carpet for me when immediately after my tenure ended, Bernie Sanders said, I'm endorsing Joe Biden. I said, with all due respect, I am not. And I also haven't talked to Bernie Sanders since then either, right? So there's a possibility of being willing and able to be critical of people that you once worked for because you agreed with many aspects of what they were fighting for. But most people aren't, and part of the reason why they aren't is because they're very much looking for continued employment either within the party or within the party's arm of the media sphere.
It's a pretty cozy club. And obviously there are plenty of, Republican comms people who have left Republican administrations and now work in conservative media. So it's really not don't at all mean to say that this is only an issue for the mainstream media and for Democrats. These cozy relationships are everywhere. Although probably you would say on the right now that the relationship between Fox and Trump party people is so acrimonious that it's not the same level of finding positive things to say.
Yeah, but that's actually a really good illustration because it really is about establishment politics versus anti-establishment politics. And whatever you think about Donald Trump and whether he acted as an anti-establishmentarian once he was elected, there is this sense that what's good for him is necessarily good for Fox or whatever the establishment news venues are, in the same way that, you're not exactly seeing a lot of, leftist, Cornel West loving, Jill Stein loving, Bernie loving people at MSNBC and CNN. I think what a lot of viewers want is a demonstration of some willingness to admit, even when your side is wrong, that when you have complete and total adherence to your party as opposed to your principles, you are going to end up misrepresenting reality as you describe yourself as a news person. And in the context of opinion news, which obviously we're doing here, I do think that there is an appetite for it precisely because people acknowledge their priors, ideological priors, where in so many of these mainstream news contexts, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, and even oftentimes on Fox, there is this, they have these slogans that suggest that they're throwing, calling balls and strikes and throwing the ball right down the middle, when we all know what the ideological bent of these institutions are. And it's not even that we're asking, I don't think the viewers are asking folks to be ideologically pure, but just to be honest. Hi, I'm Jen Psaki. I worked for Biden. I'm never going to say anything bad about the Democratic Party. Here's the news. At least that would be honest.
Fox actually, unlike CNN and MSNBC, tries to draw an explicit distinction and says that its evening hosts are explicitly opinion people. They admit that.
Yeah, I mean,
they want you to.
It's the same with Rachel Maddow and Jen. I mean, Jen Psaki is.
They're not explicit about it the same way.
I think that everybody who sits and reads their radar into the monologue.
I don't think CNN tells you, though, that this is the part of the day where it stops being news programming and starts being opinion programming.
I mean, I don't watch the shows that regularly, but back when I did, I strongly remember Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann and all of them being billed as opinion news personalities. So, I mean, that's not where I think the problem lies as much as the fact that in the booking of their guests, their picking of their personalities, et cetera, they love people who confirm the bias of the show. So you're going to have never Trump Republicans, you're not going to have Trump Republicans, and you're never going to have a leftist that is going to do anything other than the most milquetoast criticism of the Biden administration.
Yeah.